Well, listen, if you're new with us, we all summer long, for 13 weeks, we did a series called Anchor, where we talked about the most important things in the Christian faith for 2,000 plus years and the anchors that people have held on to keep themselves centered in their faith. We finished that last week. That would give you a good sense of who we are if you want to go watch the videos, the podcasts, the services. We'd love for you to do that. Today, we're going to start a new series called 1 John. That's out of the book of 1 John. And as we start that, I want to ask you a question. How would you describe your relationship with the Bible? For some of you, the second I ask that, it brings shame. You're like, oh no. But genuinely, I want you to pause and ask yourself, just what's your relationship with the Bible right now? I was thinking about this because the way we're going to do this series is we're just going to work chapter by chapter. And of course, we don't always do this. Sometimes we do topical stuff. But every year, we try a couple times to just literally work chapter by chapter through the Bible. And so I was thinking about my own relationship with the Bible. And my story was that I grew up with my parents taking me to a Lutheran church. And my mom made me go to confirmation classes. So I did that for 4 years. And I remember I graduated, or I was confirmed in the 8th grade, and one of the things they do is they give you a big old Bible. So I remember I got this big brown leather Bible. But the truth is I didn't know what to do with that Bible, and I didn't really know how to read it. And I took it home, and I put it on my shelf, and it stayed there for the next 6 years. And when I went to college, some of you know this story, I had a radical encounter with Jesus one evening. Some people had been sharing with me about Jesus, and I had this moment that just flipped my entire life upside down. And one of the immediate things that I remembered was that I had that Bible on that bookshelf in my room at my parents' house. And so I drove across town, I left the fraternity, went across town, and I got that Bible, and I kid you not, I have a vivid memory of actually dusting the Bible off. I had to dust it off. It hadn't been picked up in 6 years. And I took it back to the fraternity house, and I opened it, and I knew that there was an Old Testament and a New Testament, and so I thought maybe I should start in the New Testament, and I opened it, and I started reading, and I still really wasn't quite sure what I was reading. And so one of the guys in the fraternity house who had been sharing with me what happened over the course of the next 3 or 4 months was every day I would read something, and then I would walk across the hall, and I would ask him what it meant. And I would ask him to help me understand it, and he began to teach me how to read the Bible. And I'm sure there were lots of stupid questions and silly questions and simple questions for him, but that's actually how I learned to read the Bible. And so my story went from one of like, I didn't really care about it, to I was frustrated, to I was confused, to one in which I began to understand how to read it up until today. And of course, there's high points and low points, but that's been my story. And so I'm curious for you. Do you have a complicated relationship with the Scriptures? I think that actually that's pretty normal. I want to normalize that for us. So many people that I talk to, it's like, man, it's complicated. Like, we know there's great stuff in there. We know there's great stories. There's great verses maybe even that we've memorized. But to think about the Bible as a whole, or even to think about a book like 1 John as a whole, for us to think about how do we understand the large themes that are happening, that can feel overwhelming. And so one of the largest helps for me throughout life has been to read something with people and to be able to ask questions. And so that's actually what we're going to do over the next few weeks. Our goal is every year to work a few of these Bible, doing an entire book of the Bible in a way that it encourages you that you might be able to do that at home, that you might actually just be able to start to read in the same way at home. And so that's our goal. You may even want to bring, guys, this is crazy. There are physical Bibles that still exist in the world. I don't know if you know this. You might want to bring one if you have one. We actually have them on the stage. They're our gift to you if you want them. But my encouragement over the next few weeks is let's actually look at the Bible together. Let's just open it up, because I don't think that it has to be intimidating, and obviously there's a ton of great stuff in there. When we do these series, we always partner with a group called the Bible Project. If you've never heard of them, they do these amazing videos that summarize every book of the Bible and themes of the Bible. They're incredible. And so throughout this series, we're going to show you little clips from them of their overview of 1 John, just to give us another sort of door to walk through, to have an imagination for what's happening in this letter. And so we have about a 1-minute clip I want to show you right now about the opening of 1 John and what we just read during worship.
Introduction to 1 John, and then a clear conclusion. And the flowing cycles of the sermon in between these two don't follow any kind of rigid literary design. But there do seem to be two larger sections, Each one is marked off by the introductory phrase, "This is the message." And then each is followed by a repetition of images about how God is first light, and then how God is love. And all of the ideas in these two parts flow out of and cycle back into these two core ideas. So the introduction is very similar to the prologue of the Gospel of John. It has echoes of Genesis chapter 1 and Proverbs chapter 8. John speaks of the word of life that was with God in the beginning. For John, the word God refers to both the Father and the Son, who came to bring life into the world. And so those who saw and heard and touched the Son are called we. John's referring to himself and the apostles who were eyewitnesses of Jesus. And so now we have a message for you, the next generation of Jesus' followers. So when the apostles share the word of life with others, these others are also brought into fellowship with the Father and the Son through the apostles. The word fellowship here is koinonia in Greek. It means a participation or sharing. When people hear the message about Jesus through the apostles, that message brings them into a real relationship with Jesus himself and into a real participation in God's own love and life. And so this flows right into the first main section. This is the message. God is light.
Man, these videos are so good. Okay, so we'll keep dialing into these videos just as a way of beginning to understand the letter that we're reading. But what you're going to see, and we'll come back to the text in a moment that we read, but what you're going to see in this letter of 1 John is that the Apostle John, who's writing it, he doesn't start the same way that most of the New Testament letters start. It's really interesting. This is more like a sermon than it is a letter, even though he is writing a letter. Most of the letters that are written in the New Testament have the ancient, the greetings that occur. We might say to each other, "Hey, how you doing? How's the weather been? The Huskers are going to be so good in football this year. How's your team going to be?" We say those kinds of things to each other before we sit down and have real conversation. But that's not what John does. John is writing this letter, and it's clear that he's got something like it's like a burning passion inside of him, and he wants to get it out. And so right from the jump, he's going to just dive into what feels so important to him, and he's actually going to start answering some really, really, really clear and critical questions. The questions that you're going to see him try to answer right from the jump today is, why is it that anyone should consider believing in Jesus? Like, why care about this news that I'm writing about? And then why consider John a trustworthy witness? And he's going to just dive right in. No pleasantries, just boom, let's get to the deep stuff. And for those of you who have been following Jesus maybe for a while, like a decade or longer, for you, I want to ask you, do you remember in your life with God asking these foundational questions? Like, do you remember a season where you're going, man, Jesus seems attractive, but I just don't know, like, how does faith actually work? Why is this such good news? Why do Christians make a big deal about this? I think the danger sometimes for people who say they've been Christians or they've been followers of Jesus for decades is that this can become old hat for us. It can become stale. And part of what we want to do in this series, because this is what John is doing in his letters, is say, hey, don't let this good news become stale. Don't let it get that way for you. Be captivated and be captured again by what you're going to see are two main things: the love and the light of Jesus. And so for those of you who go, man, I've been around this church thing, I've been around this Jesus thing for a long time, I'm going to challenge you as we come to this little letter to sort of be open to being captivated again with who Jesus is. Now, if we listen to the American media, we would be convinced that no one is asking these kinds of questions in America. Like every day we're told like there's some new survey that says that faith is decreasing in America and, people just aren't interested. Like that's just all like ancient voodoo kind of stuff. That's what the media is portraying to us. But, that's not what we're finding in the life of our church. And as I talk to pastors around the country, that's not what they're finding right now. People are actually very spiritually hungry right now and are asking these fundamental questions. As a matter of fact, last week, leaving the 10:30 service here, I walked into the lobby and a young man grabbed me and he said, hey, can we talk for a minute? And we sat down and proceeded to talk for about 20 minutes. And he began to lay out his story for me. And he said, my girlfriend is a Christian, but I'm not. And we've started having conversations that are making me question what I actually believe. where I'm at in my own spiritual journey. And so we began to dialogue about that, and he began to ask these very questions, like, how is it that someone believes in Jesus? What does that actually mean to be a Christian? What does it actually mean to be a follower of Christ? And how does that make a difference in someone's life? And of course, he had the notion, he said, isn't Christianity ultimately just about like following a bunch of rules? And so we got to talk through that together right there in the lobby last week. And it was a really fun conversation and a really meaningful conversation because I was already thinking about this series and going, wow, the same questions that John is addressing in this letter, we have people all over America right now asking those same questions. And the truth is, in a room this size, some of you right now are in that exact same spot as that young man last week. You're asking these fundamental questions about Christianity. And I think it's happening all over America because of the turmoil and the pain and what we've experienced over the last 2 years, that people are actually waking up to go, man, what is this all about? And what is it that I want to be at the center of my life? What am I going to be all about? What is my life going to be all about? And what is the meaning of all of this? Because it's been a little chaotic. And here's what's interesting. If you're a person who goes, I seriously want to pursue truth, I want to pursue these spiritual questions, the big questions of life, the reality, the challenge you have living in modern day America is that so much information is being pushed at you right now. Like, you're asking big questions, but then so much information is cascading over your life, it's hard to actually push out a bunch of the noise to hear the signal. This week, I began to look at this like, man, how much information are we actually dealing with right now with our phones and our TVs and everything that's moving towards us? And check this out. Do you know that scientists right now, they believe that the average American adult is being exposed to about 74 gigabytes of information every day? Now, that probably means nothing to you. It meant nothing to me. But here's what 74 gigabytes, the equivalency of that is that it's like watching 16 movies a day and trying to process the plot in all 16 movies every day. That's impossible. They're saying that's how much information is flooding into your ears and into your eyes every day. Now, to give you comparison, 500 years ago, so somewhere in the 1500s, the most educated humans on planet Earth would have processed about 74 gigabytes of information in their entire lives. You're being asked to do that in a single day. So as you're seeking what is true and what is right and what is eternal, you're being flooded with all kinds of information that no one else has ever had to deal with. Let me prove it to you. Let's play a little game. All right, this is going to be fun. Who is Kim Kardashian dating right now? I love this so much. It was Pete Davidson, but now they're broke up. Sad. She's single, fellas. What is J-Lo's new name? Jennifer Lynn Affleck. Okay? Married to Ben now. Did Johnny Depp win his trial? A resounding yes. Heck yeah, he did. How much money did he win? $10 million. Yeah, but how much did he have to give back? $2 million. Good job. I can tell who we're into here. Johnny Depp, right? Okay, so I want you to wrap your mind around that. Most of us knew some of the answers to those questions. You know about famous people's dating lives, marriages, divorces, kids, trials, the money that they have. Think about that. And then get to more serious stuff. You know when certain rockets are being fired in the Ukraine right now. You know when certain terrorist actions are happening in the Middle East or in Africa right now. You know where droughts are occurring. You know what the Chinese government is up to in certain realms today. No one on planet Earth has ever had to process that much information then in the middle of going, now what is life all about? What is it, what is the meaning of all of this? And so we're being flooded, and so it's difficult. And then we're being asked not just what is the information, but what is the source, right? Fake news entered our world a few years ago. And so now we have a hard time when we hear stuff, you can go, well, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't know if I can trust that source. And this is true for all of us. And this is a really important question for us to answer because we're only going to believe the sources that we trust. We have a lot of sources coming into our life right now. I remember in my own story, the sources I trusted the most were my friends. And my friends lived like I lived, and I lived like them, and our parents all dragged us to church, and we kind of thought that was probably important, and we had this intellectual assent that, like, Jesus was a historical person, but none of us had that drop sort of from the head to the heart, and this became a real thing, and that there was this God of the universe that took on flesh and actually loved me, didn't just want me to perform for him, but loved me and wanted a relationship with me. I had no idea what that was about, and so I was playing church games. I would go to church on Sunday, but then I would live how I wanted to live during the week because that's how my friends lived. They were the sources I trusted. And when I got into the fraternity house, I met a dude whose life actually matched the message that he preached. There was integrity in his life, and he lived according to what he said, and there was a peace about his life that I was really attracted to because we were doing all this partying and thinking this is what would bring life, and I found myself so restless. And the reality right now in America is that there are people all around us who are looking for someone whose message matches their life. Now, they're not looking for perfection. They know no one's perfect. But what they are looking for is authenticity. They're looking for people who say, this is what I really believe to be fundamentally true about the universe and my life, and I'm doing my very best to try to live that out. That is the great calling and the great opportunity for those of you who say that you're followers of Jesus. People are desperate for that. Well, we get to the start of this letter, and here's where I want to draw us in, and then we're going to finish. Again, the goal today is just to set us up to be thinking about what the Apostle John is going to write and the importance of what he is writing. And so let me reread this scripture for you and just make a few observations, and then we're going to close for today and pick back up next week. So let's read it. Verse 1. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. And Ray, let's just leave this up here just for a second. So I want you to look at that first verse, and here's what we see. The Apostle John is going to make an argument in this letter that this is accurate information. This is accurate news that he's giving you. This isn't fake news. This is accurate. And the claim that he's going to make is that he was a firsthand eyewitness. I don't know if you thought much about this, but even in courtrooms in America, the most powerful piece of evidence is eyewitness testimony. Now, maybe the one thing that's more powerful than that now is we have video. Everyone has a camera on their phone, and so in a lot of trials, there's actual video because someone recorded what happened. Sometimes that's more important than eyewitness testimony, but it's still right up there. And in the ancient world, the most important testimony would have been eyewitness. And John is saying, hey, listen, I'm not offering you a philosophy for a better life. What he's saying is, I'm offering you an experience like the one that I had. He's saying, I got to talk with this dude named Jesus. I got to walk with this guy. I got to listen to this guy teach. I watched this guy heal people. I saw them nail him to a cross. I saw the tomb he was in. I ran to that tomb on Easter morning. I know that tomb was empty, and I saw him again, and I put my fingers in his hands and in his side. I am telling you, this is accurate news. When you're thinking about what it is, when all the information you're trying to process, what is true, what's at the center of all this, you should consider this, is what John says. And John, it's interesting. He says we. He uses the word we instead of I. And I find that to be really interesting because he's saying, listen, it's not just me. There's a whole group of people that had this same experience. So again, this isn't philosophy. This is an actual experience. And what becomes more compelling is that every one of those people that John is claiming, the original apostles, they all died for their faith. So men who ran from Jesus on the night of his crucifixion, they all ran. They all ran from him. They all deserted him. But later in life, all of them except John died for proclaiming this accurate news. John wasn't killed, but John was set on an island by himself, and he died on an island all by himself. That's how he was persecuted. And so there's power in this. They were willing to die for their faith. And so I wonder for those of you in the room who you go, I'm trying to figure out what would it mean to believe in Jesus and follow Jesus? I would just ask you a very kind question this morning. What will it take for you? How accurate does it have to be? What evidence do you need? No one in scholarly circles anymore is debating that Jesus was a historical person. No one is debating that Jesus was killed by the Romans. That's a historical fact, proven in history. No one's debating that. And so the question for you is, what evidence will you need to believe that this is true, that this could be for your life? It's worth asking. For those of you who say, hey, I already believe that, I wonder for you, is there something in the Bible that maybe you've been reading or that you've heard someplace that you're really resisting right now? Like that maybe it's accurate, but the truth is so much of this comes down to our will, doesn't it? It's not so much that we don't know that that's true. It's just in our will, we're like, I don't know if I want to bend to that. I don't know if I want to say yes to that. Is there something in the testimony of the scriptures right now that you are resisting, but that God is inviting you and saying, I would love for you to begin to embrace this. I'd love to see this thing begin to change in your life. And I want to encourage us to say yes to him. We're not going to regret it because listen, we are being discipled and mentored by culture right now. There is no way around it, y'all. We are fish in water. And it is hard to see the water. I mean, you have a phone in your pocket. You are being mentored and discipled by whatever apps it is that you're opening right now. And the question is, will we choose to balance that out? Will we choose to listen to news that's actually more important than that? Because everything on our apps is telling us about bad news, and yet on Sundays when we gather, we have the greatest news that's ever been proclaimed. But when you're dealing with 20 and 30 and 40 hours of all this other news, and you hear 30 minutes of good news, typically the bad news is going to win out. And so John comes and says this is accurate news. And John comes in verse 2. Here, the life appeared. We have seen it and testified to it. We proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and has appeared to us. John says this is really, really important news. This is eternal news. It's more important than what you're opening up on your apps. He didn't say, listen, I know your life is busy. I know things are going on in your life, but I need you to start to pay attention to what is most important. Could you give a little bit more attention and time to that? We were just with... Our family was with friends this last weekend who we hadn't seen in a while, and they moved. They were in these ministry, churchy kind of positions and moved, and they have, jobs now in the real world. And we were talking about it, and they said, we said, what's that been like? And they said, what the number one thing that we have really been present to is that everyone is just 2 inches deep, and everyone is just living for Friday. They're living for the weekend. Is that anytime we try to talk with our neighbors or now our coworkers about anything of significance, of ultimate importance, everyone backs away. Everyone feels very anxious about that conversation. They said it's been really hard to go deep with people. And in this letter, John's not going to pull any punches. He's going to say, I want to talk about eternal life. I want to talk about the most important thing there is to talk about on planet Earth, eternal life. I'm not going to pull any punches. Let's go deep now. And he's going to bring that to us. And, I want to give us a pastoral word about this. I was thinking about that this week, and I was praying, and I felt like the Lord reminded me of Jesus tells a story about soils, and that every human is one of 4 soils. And when he tells the story, he talks about the third soil. And in the third soil, it says it's people who hear this good news. It's important news. It's accurate news. It's good news for them. They embrace it. They think it's great. And they embrace it. But then he says this key line. He says, but then life's worries, riches, and pleasures begin to choke out that important good news. Life's worries, riches, and pleasures begin to choke out what is most important. People get overwhelmed by the other information. People get overwhelmed by pursuits that are not eternal. Not saying that all pursuits are bad, but just they get overwhelmed and they get stuck over here and they lose sight of what is most important. And in this series, John is going to keep saying to us, hey, keep your eyes on what is most important. You've got to bat away all the extra stuff that's coming at you to stay focused on what's important and what's real. And I wonder for us, where in our lives might we need to make some adjustments? where we need to devalue something so that we can value something more important. And again, it's not even necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we're engaged in good things, but we're missing the great or the ultimate thing. And I think in this series, God is going to invite us to rebalance those scales, to maybe simplify our lives a little bit to be able to stay focused on what is most important. In verse 3, John is going to make this argument that this is actually relational news, which is really important, y'all. This isn't just intellectual. It's not just I believe something. This actually has to make a difference in our actual lives. And so in verse 3, he says, we proclaim to you what we have seen and heard so that you also may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. He says, listen, if you embrace not this philosophy, but this experience of following Jesus, you know what else you get? You know what we're going to throw in? It's only $19.99 and we're going to throw in another. You get the church of Jesus Christ. You get relationship with brothers and sisters that you never had. And that's miraculous. For me, some of my closest friends in the world, I only have them not because of common interests. Like I'm friends, I mean, this is shocking. I'm friends with people who don't love NBA basketball. With Jesus, all things are possible. That's what happens. John's making the argument, when you begin to have this experience of following Jesus, you know what else you get? You get his people. And you get to be on the journey with them, and you get brothers and sisters who are going to walk with you and carry you through. He goes, you get to have fellowship not only with God, but you get to have fellowship with his kids, and that's incredible. And for some of us, I think there's a pastoral word. For some of you, in this season this fall, the challenge I want to make for you is, do you have a few friends that you're doing life with that follow Jesus? Like that genuinely can encourage you, that actually you've given permission to speak truth to you. You've just said, hey, you have access to my life. If you see something in my life that doesn't align with the message that I proclaim, you can say it to me. Do you have friends like that? That's a challenge for us, and that's what John's saying. Now, for some of you, you've been around the church so long that the challenge is the opposite. You have a ton of friends who are following Jesus, which is awesome, but then you need to figure out, how do I have friends who don't follow Jesus? And how do we hang out? And how do I get to know their lives and what they believe, and they get to know my life and what I believe? And let's end here. Here's verse 4. We write this to make our joy complete. This is such an interesting phrase that John says. John says, as we go on this journey together, as we focus on what is absolutely true and eternal, and we kind of cut out the rest of the noise, as we do this together as a family and as a community, we're going to find joy that we've never experienced before. There's going to be joy. You know, we live in a culture right now that's very depressed. I saw the statistics for the number, and by the way, I believe in medicine, and I believe in doctors, and I absolutely believe in, you know, the diagnosis of depression and all the things, all those things I believe fundamentally are real. But the question is, what is the underlying cause of that, and then how do we combat that? And medicine may be a part of that, but John's going to say, listen, there's joy that you were created for that you're only going to experience being connected to Jesus and being connected to his people. And I got to tell you, that's my experience. You know, I don't probably say this enough, but the great joy of my life, outside of like our family, is to get to do this life with you. That we get to be on journey together. That we get to grow up together in our faith as a community. And then that we get a partner together to do things like the severe weather shelter, that we actually get to make a difference in real people's lives in our city. And we get to do that together. And that brings me so much joy, y'all. It's better than any high I've ever had, and I've done a lot of drugs. It's just better than that. It's better than that because it's the joy that we have been made for. And so I want to call us to that in this series this fall. There'll be places where there's opportunities for you to grow and to connect with the people of God, whether that's Midpoint on Wednesday nights, whether it's other life circles, whether it's getting involved in serving. But I want to encourage us, if you're going, I want to experience more real joy in my life, John's going to make the argument that that's done in the people of God. And so in this opening prologue, John is trying to answer this basic question, why believe? And I just want to land it here with joy. Why believe? Because the proof is in the pudding that there's been no greater joy on planet Earth than to know Jesus and to be connected to his people and to get to do that together. Amen?